March 25th, 1900, Volume 3, The Incarnate Word is like Sun for Souls. This morning my adorable Jesus in the act of coming told me, just as the sun is the light of the world, so did the Word of God, in incarnating himself, become the light of souls. And just as the material sun gives light in general and to each one in particular, so much so that each one can enjoy it as if it were his own, in the same way, the Word, while giving light in general, is sun for each one in particular, so much so that each one can have this divine sun as if it were for himself alone. Who can say what I understood about this light and the beneficial effects that abound in souls who keep this sun as if it were their own? It seemed to me that by possessing this light, the soul dispels darkness, just as the material sun, by rising over our horizon, dispels the darkness of the night. If the soul is cold, this divine light warms her. If she is naked of virtues, it fecundates her. If she is inundated by the pestilent disease of lukewarmness, with its heat, it absorbs that bad humor. In a word, so as not to be too long, this divine sun, introducing her into the center of its sphere, covers the soul with all its rays, and reaches the point of transforming the soul into its very light. After this, since I was feeling all weary, wanting to refresh me, Jesus told me, "This morning I want to delight in you." And he began to make his usual loving stratagems. March 25th, 1908, Volume 8, Temptations Can Be Conquered Easily. Where there is passion, the devil has more strength. Continuing in my usual state, blessed Jesus came for just a little and told me, "Daughter, temptations can be conquered easily, because the devil is the most cowardly creature that can exist, and a contrary act, a contempt, a prayer, are enough to make him flee. In fact, these acts render him even more cowardly than he is, and in order not to bear that confusion, as soon as he sees the soul resolute and not wanting to pay attention to its cowardice, he flees terrified. Now, if the soul cannot easily free herself, it means that it is not only a temptation, but a passion rooted within the soul, which tyrannizes her together with the temptation. And therefore she is unable to free herself, and where there is passion, the devil has more strength to make fun of the soul. March 25th, 1928, Volume 24, How the Knowledges Are Many Steps That the Divine Will Has Taken in Order to Return into the Midst of Creatures. How these steps will bring life, light, and sanctity. Sighs of Jesus for them to be made known. While following the divine Fiat in order to accompany its acts, my poor mind kept thinking about the many truths that my beloved Jesus had told me on the divine will, and with how much love and interest he had manifested them to me. So I was thinking to myself, the first truths he told me seemed flashes of light that unleashed an endless light from within them. Then, little by little, no longer flashes, but fountains of light, and my poor soul would remain under the continuous jet of these fountains of light. Finally, they seemed to be seas of light, of truths, in which I would remain so submerged that my little capacity would not be able to take everything, and would leave many truths in that very sea in which I felt immersed. But it was not given to me to restrict all of that endless light within myself, that, converting into words, manifested to me the harmony, the beauty, the power of the Supreme Will. And now it seems to me that I am in the light, but the light does not speak. And though I drink seas of light, I am unable to say anything. Now, while I was thinking of this, my always lovable Jesus moved in my interior, and all love told me, "My daughter, you must know that as man withdrew from our will, our paternal goodness withdrew its operating life from the midst of creatures. This is why they have been able to say very little about it, because the sea of the operating light of my divine fiat was not flowing in them as life, because they themselves ungratefully had rejected it. And out of our highest goodness, we left to them the good of being able to follow the orders of our will, not the life, in which they could hope for their salvation, because without it there is neither salvation nor sanctity. But our paternal goodness, our will and our love desired, longed for, strongly yearned for its return as operating life into the midst of creatures. We saw that they could not reach the perfect purpose of creation, nor form the image wanted by us, completely in our likeness, just as we created them, without the operating life of our fiat, because our fiat is the prime act of the creature, and if it is missing in her, she remains disordered, counterfeit, because she lacks the prime act of her existence. Now you must know that, after many centuries of hidden sighs, our Supreme Being gushed out more intensely with love, more than in the very creation and redemption. As our love, gushing out, overflowed from us, we felt the need of love to take the first steps toward the creature. So, as I began to manifest to you the first truths about my divine will, I pushed it strongly to take the first steps into the midst of creatures, and I centralized these steps in you by means of its knowledges. And as I saw that you would place your steps in those of the divine fiat, I rejoiced. I made feast, and manifesting to you more truths about it, I would push it to take yet more steps. Therefore, as many truths as I have told you about my will, so many are the steps that I made my fiat take, in order to make it return as operating life into the midst of creatures. This is why I have told you so many of them, that one can say that heaven and earth are filled with the steps of the knowledges about my will. And uniting together, they form the sea of light in your soul, that wants to overflow from within you to make its way into the midst of creatures. These steps will be multiplied according to how much the truths about my will be recognized, because I never manifest a truth if not when I want to give it as gift, giving the life and the good it contains. And therefore, until my divine will is known with all of its knowledges, its steps will be hampered, and the good it wants to do to creatures suspended. If you knew how painful it is to be able to do good, placing oneself in the act of doing it, and having to keep it suspended because it is not known, waiting and longing for it to be made known, so as to be relieved of the weight of the good that one wants to give. Oh, how you would hasten to make known all the steps of my fiat. More so since they are steps that will bring not remedies, helps, or medicines, but fullness of life, of light, of sanctity, and totality of goods. And my love, gushing out and flooding the whole world, will restore the order of creation and the dominion of my will in the midst of the human family. After this, my sweet Jesus made himself seen with many rays of light coming out from within his divine heart. Each knowledge about the divine will was impressed at the point from which the rays started, in such a way as to form the most beautiful crown of light around that divine heart. And my beloved Jesus added, "My daughter, look what a beautiful crown of glory and of light my divine heart possesses. A more beautiful and refulgent crown it could not possess. These rays are all the knowledges about my will. However, these rays are hampered. They cannot extend, because its knowledges are not known. Therefore they cannot extend and expand so as to fill the whole earth with light. It happens as it would to the sun if its rays, that start from the center of its sphere, were forced to remain in the air, without being able to extend so as to touch the earth and invest it with its light and heat. Unable to extend its rays, the sun would not be able to give the effects that its light contains, nor could the earth receive them. There would be a certain distance between the earth and the light of the sun, and this distance would prevent the sun from doing good to the earth, and the earth would be sterile and infertile. Such are the knowledges about my fiat. If they are not made known, its rays cannot extend and take souls as though in their hands so as to warm them, remove from them the torpor of the human will, mold them anew, transform them again in the life that my fiat wants to infuse in them. Because these knowledges are and contain the new creation of transforming the creature as he came out of our creative hands. March 25th, 1929, Volume 25. How the creation runs a vertiginous race toward its creator. One who lives in the divine will is inseparable from it. Order that Jesus has kept in manifesting the truths about the divine will. Renewal of the creation. Importance of the truths. My abandonment in the divine fiat continues. I felt the littleness of my poor soul in the midst of all created things, and I, as though having my own motion, my continuous race in all creation, feel inseparable from it. My will and that of creation are one, which is the sole and only divine will. Therefore, since the will of all is one, we do one same thing, and we all run as though to our first center, to our Creator, to say to him, "Your love issued us, and your same love calls us back into yourself with a vertiginous race, to say to you, we love you, we love you," to sing the praises of your inextinguishable and interminable love. And so in this way, coming out of his center again to continue our race that never makes stops, we do nothing but go in and out of his divine womb in order to form our round of love, our loving race toward our Creator. So while I was running with the whole creation to form my race of love toward the divine majesty, my always lovable Jesus, coming out of my interior, told me, "My daughter, one who lives in my divine volition is bound to all creation. Neither can creation do without this fortunate creature, nor can the creature unbind herself from the created things, because the will of one and the other being one, which is my divine will, they form one single body, with many members inseparable from one another. So I look at one who lives in my divine will, and I see her heavens. I return to look at her, and I see her sun. My gazes, enraptured by so much beauty, fix more upon her and find her see. In sum, I see in her all the varieties of each created thing, and I say, O power of my divine fiat, how beautiful you render for me she who lives in you. You give her primacy over the whole creation. You give her the race so fast that she runs more than wind. And excelling over everything, she is the first to enter into my divine center to say to me, I love you, I glorify you, I adore you. And as she forms her echo in the whole creation, all repeat after her pleasant refrains. My daughter, this is why I take so much love in manifesting to you all that regards my divine will. Everything I have manifested to you about it is nothing other than the whole order of its kingdom. And all this was to be manifested from the beginning of creation if Adam had not sinned, because in each manifestation of mine regarding my divine fiat, man was to grow in the sanctity and beauty of his Creator, and therefore I intended to do it little by little, giving him as though many sips of divine life, to make him grow according to how my divine will wanted. So by sinning, man interrupted my speaking and reduced me to silence. After many centuries wanting man to return into my fiat, I have resumed my speaking with so much love, more than a tender mother, when she loves and yearns to give birth to her child, in order to kiss him, surround him with affections, enjoy him and squeeze him tightly to her maternal breast, and to fill him with all her goods and happinesses. So I did in resuming my speaking and manifesting to you all the order of the kingdom of my divine volition, and the way that the creature must have in my kingdom. Therefore, manifesting to you so many truths about my fiat has been nothing less than issuing into the field again all the order and love that I would have kept if man had not sinned, and my kingdom had had its life upon earth. In my speaking I have kept such order that one truth is so bound to the other that if anyone wanted to snatch away or conceal some truths, they would form a void in the kingdom of my divine fiat and would subtract a strength from creatures to induce them to live in my kingdom. In fact, each truth that regards my divine volition is a place that it takes in order to reign in the midst of creatures, as well as a way and an empty space that they find in order to take possession of them. Therefore, all the truths I have told you have such a connection among themselves that by removing some, in that point one would see as though a heaven without stars, or a void without sun, or an earth without flowering. In fact, in all these truths that I have told you, there is the renewal of the whole creation, and in each truth, my fiat, more than sun, wants to come out into the field again, just as it did in creation. And taking its field of action, with its light it wants to eclipse all the evils of creatures, and laying its veil of light over all, it wants to give them so much grace as to give them its creative hand, to make them re-enter into the womb of its divine volition. Therefore, everything I have told you about my divine will has such importance that it costs me more than the whole creation, because it is a renewal of it, and when an act is renewed, it costs double love. And in order to be more sure, we place double grace and double light to be given to creatures, so that we might not have to suffer the second sorrow, maybe more painful than the first, that we had in the beginning of creation when man sinned and formed within himself the failure of our love, of our light, and of the precious inheritance of our supreme volition. This is why I am so attentive that you may lose nothing of what I tell you about my divine will, because there is such importance in these truths that in concealing some, it would be as if one wanted to move the sun from its place, or to make the sea come out of its shore. What would happen to the earth? Think about it yourself. And so it would be if any of the truths about my divine will that I have manifested to you with so much order were missing. March 25th, 1934, Volume 33. Prayer in the Divine Will acts as spokesman for the acts of the divine fiat. The humanity of our Lord possesses the generative virtue. Divine love consists in reproducing itself in everything and in each one. My poor mind, it seems that it does not know how to be without going in search of the acts done by the divine will. If it did not do this, it seems to me that the royal palace from where to reside, the food in order to feed me, the air in order to breathe, the step in order for me to be able to wander in its interminable confines, is lacking to me. They are the acts of the divine will that, while I seek, they call me, and uniting together with me, it seems that they whisper to my ear, "We are in your power, and with the power of these acts you have sufficient money in order to ask, in order to impetrate the kingdom of our supreme fiat." In order to obtain a divine volition, divine acts are needed, and as the creature comes into it, our acts extend themselves around hers, and our act takes her act as in triumph, and asks together with her for the triumph, the dominion of our will on earth. But while my mind enjoyed the enchanting sight of my little act surrounded by the seas of the divine acts, my little love surrounded by the sea of the divine love, that with ancient and incessant voice does not know how to ask anything other than Fiat voluntas tua, on earth as it is in heaven, my sovereign Jesus, surprising me all love, told me, "My blessed daughter, how sweet, consoling, powerful it is to hear my will with all its acts in the little act, love and adoration of the creature, asking for the Fiat to reign on earth. It makes use of the little love of the creature as spokesman, in order to let it resound in all her acts, so as to let her ask for its kingdom. It does not want to do it alone, but it wants her as intermediary in order to do this. But do you want to know for what this prayer that contains divine power, value, and weapons that wage war on us with incessant ways serves? It serves to call God to earth, to live in each creature. It serves to make my own divine will and all its works pray that it come to reign on earth. It serves to prepare the place in God himself for the creature. It is a divine prayer, prodigious, that knows how to obtain everything." After this I continued my abandonment in the arms of Jesus. His divine heart jumped strongly, strongly with love, with joy, with happiness, and with sorrow. And my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, all the acts of my humanity possess the generative virtue. Therefore the mind thinks, and it generates holy thoughts. It thinks, and it generates light, science, wisdom, divine knowledges, new truths. And while it generates, it pours again in torrents into the minds of creatures, without ever ceasing to generate. In fact, every creature has in her mind the secret repository of these children of mine generated from my mind, with the difference that some hold them honored, courted, giving them the freedom to let them produce the good that they possess, and some hold them without taking care of them, and as suffocated. My gazes generate glances of love, of compassion, of tenderness, of mercy. I never lose sight of anyone. My gazes multiply for everyone, and oh, the power of my gazes, with how much pity it pours itself over the human miseries. It is so much that, in order to place them in safety, it encloses the creature in my pupil, in order to keep her defended and surrounded by an inexpressible affection and tenderness, as to amaze the whole of heaven. My tongue speaks, and it generates words that give life, sublime teachings. It generates prayers. It speaks and generates wounds and arrows of love, in order to give the generation of my ardent love to everyone, and to make me loved by everyone. My hands generate works, wounds, nails, blood, embraces, in order to make me work of each one balm, in order to sweeten their wounds, nails in order to wound them and purify them, blood in order to wash them, embraces in order to embrace them and carry them as in triumph in my arms. My whole humanity continuously generates in order to reproduce itself in each creature. Our divine love consists exactly of this, reproducing itself in every one and in each one. And if we did not have the generative virtue, it would not be a reality, but a way of speaking. While in us first we do the deeds, and if we use speaking, it is in order to confirm the deeds. Even more because my humanity is inseparable from the divinity that possesses, by nature, the generative virtue, and as over creatures as a mother with her arms open, and it generates its life in them in an admirable way. But do you know who receives the effects, the complete fruit of this continuous generation of mine? One in whom my will reigns, who not only receives the generation of my acts, but reproduces them in an admirable way. End of March 25th, Feast of the Annunciation. Fiat.